Okay, as I promised, here is my final word on Dragon Age 2. I've just finished the game, so I now feel I can fairly judge the story and characters, but before I do, I'd just like to go into a few more details about points that I made in the last video. A little retrospective, now that I've actually finished the game and gone through right to the end. First off, I stand by everything I said previously. The gameplay improves marginally as time goes by, and the boss battles do actually require to use some tactics towards the end of the game. But for the most part, it's just brainless flash and flare all the way through, bar about 3 memorable fights, which I won't go into for the sake of spoilers. Suffice to say, out of 29 hours of gameplay, having only 3 memorable encounters, one of which is the last boss fight, comes off as more than a little bit weak. One thing that never improves though is the dialogue system. I had to reload my game several times because the option I chose from the dialogue wheel resulted in my character saying the opposite of what I actually wanted. Again, I found myself asking why BioWare changed this system from what we had in Dragon Age Origins. You knew exactly what you were going to say, you knew exactly what the context was, and you had far more options. For one thing, it's now pretty much impossible to talk your way out of a fight with this new system. I managed it a couple of times early in the game, but after that, every meeting resulted in combat. Nearly every single meeting. This had the knock-on effect of making almost every quest incredibly dull, as it boiled down to pick up quest, go somewhere, kill person, come back, hand in quest. That was it. Go out, combat, come back, XP. Honestly, if I wanted to do that, I'd play World of Warcraft. To make matters even worse, I was amazed by how often the game didn't even give me the courtesy of pretending that I had a choice. Even if the point of my quest was to try and contact someone peacefully, I'd have to murder my way through their goons first, and then frequently murder that person too without the dialogue wheel so much as making an appearance. The game even trips over itself with these things. In one quest I rescued a Templar from some blood mages, and one of my party rather astutely suggested that I should keep the fact that he was abducted by blood mages to myself when I filed the report of my findings. I was fully prepared to do this. But the moment I initiate a dialogue with the NPC, the first thing my character went is, "Blood magic! He was abducted by blood mages! Blood mages! He is infested with blood magic! Blood mages!" Meaning that essentially, the rest of the dialogue sequence was me just doing damage control. Oh, and not once did I see a single dialogue option related to my character's cunning score. You know, the only way I actually talked my way out of conversations was by having Varric in the party who did it for me. The inventory system got far less irritating when I learnt to never pass up the opportunity to go to a shop and sell off everything in my junk section. However, I still count this against the game owing to the fact that it just does not serve any point or purpose. And apparently you can upgrade your companion's armor. I have no idea how I did it and who I did it to, but I have an achievement saying that I did it. The copy-paste dungeons. This problem exists throughout the whole game and only gets worse as time goes by. I am not exaggerating when I say that after about 4 hours of gameplay you will have seen every single level and map that Dragon Age 2 has to offer. The remaining 25 odd hours will be spent revisiting them and retracing over the same paths that you've been over a dozen times already. And yes, it's just as cheap, lazy, and boring as it sounds. Finally in this segment, DLC. EA, please take note. If I buy a first-hand game on the release day, I do not expect to have to fork out another £8 in order to be able to have all the characters. You can shove your Sebastian Bale DLC right up your greedy, fat arse. It was barely tolerable when you did it with Zaid in ME2. The only thing that made it tolerable was the fact I got him free as an incentive to buy the game first-hand. That I can understand. This is just profiteering. Plain and simple. I won't be a part of it, and I hope you choke on it as much as any corporation can. So, with that aside, let's have a look at the story and characters. Story first. This may come as a surprise to you, but I feel it's inferior to Dragon Age Origins. For that criticism though, it certainly isn't bad. It's still not as good as the original though. Plot points are brought in when they're needed and quickly discarded again once they've served their purpose. I'm a firm believer that one of the marks of a good writer is the ability to shoot multiple things at once with Chekhov's gun, and keeping the overarching plot moving, even if it's done subtly so the reader doesn't notice at first. Dragon Age 2 essentially plays out like 3 short episodes with little to no bearing against each other. The closest thing there is to an overarching plot is the growing sense of tension in the city, which does eventually reach a head. Aside from that, plot points are brought up and discarded as needed, and many interesting ideas, such as the Primeval Tig and the Lyrium Idol, ultimately result in next to nothing, despite being far more interesting ideas than anything else the writers chose to run with. Nowhere is this better exemplified than the use of characters from the first Dragon Age game. You encounter 4 characters really, 7 if you count very minor NPCs. One of the major characters joins your party, the other 3 simply turn up, have some dialogue, and vanish. The minor NPCs retain their standard roles, bar one who joins your party as a main character and gets fleshed out a lot more. For the most part though, they contribute nothing to the story, the setting, or even to actually flesh out their characters. At least in Mass Effect 2, when old characters were thrown in, if they didn't join you, they were developed a little bit, and you learn about their history and what they were currently doing. Here, all we have is the equivalent of a bad cameo. They just pop up, say their lines, and then vanish into the mist, never to be seen again. Honestly, a lot of it to me smacks of setting up intentional loose ends for the sole purpose of selling DLC further down the line. This is a purely personal complaint, but I'm going to make it anyway, because I know a lot of you out there will share this opinion, but for those of you who don't, it won't put you off the game. The story just feels conceptually underwhelming after Dragon Age Origins. You're no longer fighting an ancient evil or trying to save the world from the Archdemon or the Blight or any of that good stuff. Instead, the entire struggle centres around one city, Kirkwall, and the tensions between the Templars and the mages within there. It's a perfectly good story, but it just feels like you've gone from watching the Lord of the Rings movies to an EastEnders Christmas special. It doesn't help the fact that both sides are idiots. The mages immediately jump to blood magic, screaming and crying about how oppressed they are, and the Templars will immediately jump into fascist dictator mode, brutally making any mage tranquil who so much as looks at them wrong. I suppose it's designed to highlight that ideological struggles are not often fought logically, and both sides can completely give up on reason when the passions are flared, and that they're both flawed. Unfortunately, this argument is sadly undermined when we discover that the Templar's Knight Commander's growing paranoia is not the result of human flaw or prejudice or any perfectly good balances for storytelling with morals. It's a magic idol which makes her go a little bit crazy. And again, this is the idol I mentioned earlier. It's never explained where it came from, what it does, why it was made. It's just there because it needs to be. And again, I found myself asking, why does it need to be? What is wrong with having the Knight Commander oppress these mages simply because she's batshit insane, or because she genuinely believes that she's doing the right thing? That's how it's built up for the first parts of the game. Why that sudden heel turn at the end? I have a suspicion it's along the same lines as why the Qunari no longer look humanoid. I think EA didn't want to make people feel uncomfortable by having the more unpleasant and brutal aspects of human nature out on display in human or at least humanoid characters, and so they dehumanized the Qunari and blame everything on the magic MacGuffin with the human character. But hey, that's just me. I might be wrong. For what it is, though, the story is better than most video games out there, and still actually stands head and shoulders above a lot of the current generation of RPGs. Most of my genuine ire comes again from the dialogue wheel and the fact that it limits the way that you can interact with the plot so heavily. If I had to give it a simple yay or nay, I would honestly come down in its favour and say it's a pretty good plot. It's got some very basic problems in it, but for the most part, it's perfectly workable. So, characters. Well, to be honest, they're pretty well done. The little skits from Dragon Age Origins that you'd sometimes get when wandering around are back, and they're a lot more common. Surprisingly, despite their uncanny regularity, they never really get old, and I've never heard one repeated. The way the characters play off against each other is very entertaining and also very believable. Each character has their own little backstories and quests, which are usually quite entertaining, and they also have strong personalities. Well, most of them anyway. Sadly, they don't really grow and change all that much. Their behaviour remains quite stagnant as to their attitudes and personality, despite the fact that the game takes place over the course of 9 years. The characters in Dragon Age Origins didn't develop a huge amount either, but there was a noticeable change in them. I felt there was an especially strong change in Sten and Alistair, and to a lesser extent Morrigan, especially if you were pursuing her as a romance option. In Dragon Age 2, attitudes don't seem to shift that much at all. That said, I suspect a bug may have prevented me from seeing a lot of the dialogue for some characters. We'll get back to that later. I should also point out that because of the way Dragon Age 2 treats its NPCs, you can no longer play with their approval ratings with any great ease. Some people are like that, some people won't. It does make for a more organic gameplay, I will admit, but it does mean the only way to make any significant gains towards building up your standing with them is to take them out on missions, which means that you can't get all the characters' backstory unless you play through the game multiple times. I personally have no problem with this, but it did mean I was unable to get much out of one of the characters who had a lot of promise, Fenris, as I simply didn't use him that much.
My first memory is receiving these markings, the lyrium being branded into my flesh. The agony wiped away everything, whatever life I had before I became a slave.
Bugs. For the most part, my experience with Dragon Age 2 was bug-free. To be honest, I can't even be certain that the matters I'm about to raise are actually bugs, or if I just did something wrong. To start with, towards the end of the game, Isabella kept appearing in my home with a "Get a quest here" mark over her head. However, when I spoke to her, she simply spouted a generic line of dialogue, and nothing happened. I had been trying for her romance arc, so perhaps it had something to do with it. I think it may have simply bugged out, as I've said. In addition to this, several quests at the end of the game just didn't seem to spawn properly. I'd check the maps, and there would be no marker. No biggie there, I thought. I'll just visit the locations and have a look around. Maybe the game's not leading me by the nose anymore. No such luck. With this quest, I did find a non-hostile bandit leader on the map, but I couldn't actually interact with him at all. This quest told me to check my map for a lair, which never showed up, and this rumour just said, "Can't be followed up at this time," for the entire game. Did I miss something? Was its only purpose there to taunt me? I don't know, but I have a nasty feeling that if this was intentional, it's there to set up DLC. Again. So, taking in every angle and evaluating the experience as a whole now that I've completed the game, I have to say that Dragon Age 2 is still a vastly inferior game to Dragon Age Origins. But again, that doesn't make it a terrible game. On its own merits, it's not bad. In fact, it's fairly good. But if you play the original Dragon Age, and if you like standard RPGs, you will be constantly irritated by a lot of the changes that have been made. That said, the story and characters still hold up quite well. In fact, they're better than a lot of video games out there today and the current generation of RPGs, as I've said. It's just a shame that the rest of the game doesn't hold up. That said, if you're an action gamer and looking to get into RPGs, this could be your way in. The fast-paced flow in the action makes it instantly rewarding and gratifying, but there's enough of the RPG elements left in there to give you a basic grounding. Still though, if that is who you are, I would say try out Mass Effect instead. For one thing, it's going to be a lot cheaper, and for another thing, it's just an overall better game. So at the end of the day, when all the chips are down, Dragon Age 2 is probably going to be forgotten. Which is a shame, because there was some real potential here, but there have been a lot of very bad decisions which just ensured that the game could never be all it could be.